Well, good afternoon. Actually, evening here. It's just so light out, it seems like afternoon. Thank you for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. I'm going to, here it's July 2nd, 2025. I have a bit of stories to share with you regarding certain areas in the world, certain countries, and how they line up on certain prophecies. And what's going on with those countries. So I'm going to start with this article here. Came out July 1st. Moscow-Baku tensions. What is known so far? A deadly Russian police raid on an alleged Azerbaijani crime ring has prompted a major diplomatic flare-up between the two nations. Last week, Russian police raided a suspected ethnic Azerbaijani crime ring in the city of Yekaterinburg as part of an investigation into a string of murders dating back to the early 2000s, which were believed to be gang assassinations and contract killings. During the raid, two elderly suspects identified as brothers, Gusin and Zidin Safarov, ended up dead. It has been established that one of the suspects succumbed to heart failure, the Russian authorities have stated. 6 suspects in the case, all of whom are Russian citizens, have been taken into pretrial custody. After the international scandal erupted, the probe into the alleged organized crime group was transferred to the Central Office of the Russian Investigative Committee. The raid and the death of the suspects have invoked fury in Azerbaijan, with multiple politicians and public figures demanding retaliation against Moscow and accusing the Russian authorities of targeting the alleged crime group based on its ethnicity rather than anything else. Shortly after the incident, the Azerbaijani Ministry of Culture canceled multiple events involving Russian performers while the country's parliamentary delegation scrapped its scheduled visit to Moscow. On Monday, Azerbaijan's National Food Safety Agency reported the destruction of some 639 kilograms of onion rings imported from Russia, claiming they were contaminated with bacteria. On Tuesday, Baku officially accused Russian law enforcement of beating the Safarov brothers to death. The bodies of the suspects have been transferred to Azerbaijan for burial, and local medical examiners reportedly indicated that both men had succumbed to severe blunt force trauma. Baku targets Russian journalists. On Monday, police in Baku raided the office of Russian news agency Sputnik, arresting 2 senior editors. The agency has been accused of operating through illegal financing. The head of the editorial office, Igor Kartevik, and editor-in-chief Evgeny Belousov were placed in pre-trial detention for 4 months. During the raid, Azerbaijani police also detained an editor with the Russian video news agency Reply, who was filming outside the Sputnik's office. The journalist Aytekin, I can't say these names, spent only some 20 minutes filming before ending up in police custody. The Russian Foreign Ministry summoned Azerbaijani Ambassador Rakhman Mustafayev, shortly after the raid on Sputnik, citing Baku's hostile actions and the unlawful detention of Russian journalists. The envoy, in turn, handed the ministry a note condemning the alleged torture and degrading actions of Russian law enforcement. Now, on Tuesday, Azerbaijani police arrested 8 Russian nationals claiming they were members of a group involved in cybercrime and the trafficking of drugs from Iran. Tehran, however, maintains an extremely strict stance on the sale of narcotics, which is a capital offense. The suspects were transferred to a Baku court in a heavily armed police convoy. All the Russian nationals appear to have been severely beaten up, with multiple visible bruises and blood. Footage from the court circulated by local media suggested. All the suspects were placed in pretrial detention for 4 months. Russian media reports, however, identified 2 of the suspects as IT specialists who had left the country in the wake of the conflict between Moscow and Kiev. Another detainee was reportedly identified as a Russian tourist who was in Azerbaijan on vacation. So, things going on here between Russia and Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan, I believe, is on the border. It's part of a border, I think, of Russia. I'll be looking at a map a little bit later, but just wanted to give you some information on that. Now we're going to go to this video with Colonel Magregor on Glenn Diesen's show, because he explains things going on with these two countries much better, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. I have two sections to share with you, so we're going to start with this part here.
The Azerbaijan has an interest in gaining at least parts or portions of Armenia. It may at some point want to capture all of it. There's no love lost between the Turks and the Armenians, as we all know, and the Azeri Turks and Azerbaijan are no exception. What's interesting about Azerbaijan is its close alliance, for all intents and purposes, with Israel. Azerbaijan provided a platform for the Mossad and the Israeli armed forces to attack Iran. They are now turning into what is increasingly a state that is hostile to Moscow. And their ambassador in Moscow has been talking to the Russian authorities about some actions they've taken recently. I think the Russians are now cognizant of what's happening, and they're very concerned about it. The next step is, of course, for the Azeri army in Azerbaijan to move into northern Iran. Like Israel that wants a greater Israel, Azerbaijan wants a greater Azerbaijan. That means it's the most logical route for expansion is into northern Iran, where you have a very large Azeri population, maybe 25% or more of the population of Iran. Now, these Azeris are Shia, as opposed to Sunni, and you have a Sunni-Shia mix in Azerbaijan. They do still speak their language. They have been a very important component of Persian civilization and of the Iranian state. But there have always been voices advocating for some sort of greater Turkish power in northern Iran. We'll see what happens, but I think the aim now on the Azerbaijan side is to move towards Tabriz, which is the center of gravity for the Azeri Turks. And this, of course, is music to the ears of Washington and in Israel, because this would contribute to their dream, which is to divide and conquer Iran. Now, whether or not that's possible, I can't judge, but I don't think we should underestimate the impact. It will certainly weaken Iran if this happens. It will divert Iranian resources. It will distract them from other things, which is ultimately a partially positive goal. If it contributes to the breakup of Iran, so much the better. And I think what we're seeing is the kind of strategy applied to Iran that has been applied to Russia. Brain was utilized, much as now there's a desire to use Azerbaijan against Iran to somehow or another break up Russia, to remove the government, then move into, and of course this is very important to the financial interests in London and New York City, to move in and strip Russia of its resources, its capacity, divide it up into smaller states, and then effectively rule it. That's failed. That gambit is over. But the gambit now is just beginning with Azerbaijan and Iran. At the same time, remember, if you look at this greater Israel map, and a lot of people look at it and say, well, this is fanciful, this could not possibly happen, there are only a few million Jews. Well, you have another problem, and that is United States and its armed forces, and you have a general in CENTCOM who is reportedly, in the news at least, closer to Mr. Netanyahu than he is to President Trump. And in fact, the White House tends to turn directly to CENTCOM for its quote-unquote intelligence, which means that they're getting the Israeli perspective and slant. Now, that may not be a big issue because you've got a chairman of the Joint Chiefs who is the senior military advisor to President Trump, who is also a very powerful, strong advocate for Israeli interests. When he was retired, he was on the board of a hedge fund that was run by Jared Kushner's brother. So as you begin to look at the ties and the people who are involved in all of this, there's an opportunity here for the U.S. Armed Forces to become involved on the ground as well as in the air and at sea directly with the Israelis. And that then takes you to Egypt, because one of the goals the Israelis have had for a very long time is to recapture the Sinai and ultimately control the Suez Canal. I mean, there's something there worth having, and it's something they think they deserve. In 1956, they moved very rapidly through Sinai towards the Suez Canal with the French and the British in the hopes of securing control of it. It didn't work. Eisenhower said, get the hell out, and ended it. Today, that's not going to happen. Today, if anything, we will back it. Now, what the level of joint planning is, what the level of joint discussions happens to be, I have no idea. These are just things floating in the ether around Washington, D.C., and down in Florida around U.S. Central Command headquarters, and as always around Langley. So we'll have to see. But it doesn't look good, and it certainly bodes ill for any short war. The question is then not if we're going to see more war and see more American involvement, but when.
Okay. So things are heating up in that area with those countries, and there's tension going on between Azerbaijan and Russia. And as he mentioned, these other things in the Suez Canal and all that, that's actually in Elder Joseph's, Holy Elder Joseph's WWIII prophecies as well. But keep in mind there, now, Colonel Magregor has been saying since the non-ceasefire, they both, Israel and Iran, quit bombing each other. He said that this is just a little respite. They're gonna collect more weapons. That I think, when I was reporting about that last night, that the U.S. stopped shipment to Ukraine and have pivoted to giving more to Israel, because Israel was running out anyway. So now they're giving all these extra weapons. Now, are they going to, is that for them to stockpile and be ready to hit Iran in sometime soon, in the near future? And then there's the second part of this video I want to show. That's the second portion that's important. Let me go to the portion that I want to go to on this.
You have to look at what's happening on the periphery. We talked about Azerbaijan. You also have to look at the Turks and Syria. And Syria is an interesting phenomenon because now we have a former deputy head of Al-Qaeda and ISIS running the country. And everybody is very happy with this, whether they're in Saudi Arabia, Washington, or Israel. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They're murdering Christians left and right. But then again, the Israelis just destroyed a village in the West Bank that was entirely Christian, burned all the homes down, and are driving the people out. So it doesn't make any difference to them. But Erdogan has something else on his agenda that's a little different. He is concerned about the emergence of a Kurdish state. And we and the Israelis have supported that. The Israelis take the position that if you're my enemy's enemy, you must be my friend. And so the Mossad has been active with the Kurds for many years, helping them. It may be that we and the Israelis are now willing to sell out the Kurds in order for Erdogan to realize his vision of crushing any emerging state that could be Kurdish in the region, that is both in Syria and northern Iraq. That's a problem because we also support the MEK, which is a Turkish, some people call it a terrorist organization. Others say they're just Kurds, nationalists that want to overthrow the regime in Tehran. And anybody who talks about overthrowing the regime in Tehran is automatically welcomed in Washington, even though these people were backed by Saddam Hussein and we went to such trouble to remove. But then we kept them in place for future use against Iran.
Okay, so that particular portion as well is Turkey and the Kurds. Now, they've been enemies for a while, a long time. And so There's prophecies on this, as you know. I'm going to share a portion of St. Paisius' prophecy that there's a video on it. I'm just going to show that one portion that was discussed, that Colonel Magregor was basically talking about, that caught my attention. Okay, so I'm going to turn this down, and I'm just going to read this because it's in Greek. So St. Pius explained that Turkey will be dismembered into three. This is when they're talking about when Russia fights Turkey. Okay, this is part of the phases here, but it's not the second phase we're in. I believe it's the one afterwards. But in any case, I want to get to this part afterwards. He explained. Okay, what did I just say? Okay, so he said he's going to be in parts. The countdown has already begun. And we, that means Greece, will get back our territories, Armenians and Kurds as well. So this is important because he does mention what's going on in that region at this time with the Armenians and the Kurds and who they're going against, which is Azerbaijan and the U.S. and Israel and all that. And so, and Turkey, of course. And so I found that very interesting that just came to my mind when I listened to that. Yeah, I know I always connect things. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's not too big of a deal to you all, but I tend to get things out of this. The other one is the Elder Joseph. I still have that up. This phase 2 that we were in on the 7 phases of World War III that Elder Joseph of Vatopodi had pointed out. Now remember, I had brought up the attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent, so we already know that. And so I want to go into. Now, I haven't seen this yet. I know there's things going on, though, in Serbia right now, and there was in Romania regarding elections, but the Serbians have been protesting big time on their corrupt government. I just saw that in the past few days reported. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and say, okay, so I'm going to go past this. Exactly the junta that will rule Turkey will attack us, that means Greece, but the Russians will move quickly southwards, rushing to occupy Turkey as quickly as possible before NATO can reinforce it. Turkey will be hit hard and destroyed completely. The Russians will have previously invaded Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, pushing back the American troops. So apparently our American troops are going to be in these countries, especially Azerbaijan, okay? And with the stirring up in those areas with Armenia and Azerbaijan and all these things going on here, this came to my mind when listening to this. And remember, this is all supposedly here says all phase 2. And like I said, there's a respite between this attack on Iran, this little 12-day war. It's not over, okay? It's not over. And let me show you this map so you can see Russia. Russia is up there, of course. And then he's going to come down through Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia to get to Turkey, and things are going to happen there. So I think that's what I wanted to share with you on this. I'm just keeping an eye out for these things because certain areas are heating up, and as Magregor said, this is just a pause. They're reloading. As you know, Israel was running out of weapons towards the end of the bombings that were going on between Iran and them. So I'm just saying it's not over. We're in these phases, and so I want to share that with you. Thanks so much for watching. Please Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and follow my channel on Rumble if you'd like. Please like my videos if you liked them. Comment on them if you have anything to comment about. And thanks so much for your support. And I'll be back later. Until next time.